You know the day destroys the night, night divides the day. Try to run, try to hide, break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side.
God bless America. Welcome to The Ranch, everybody. The podcast that explores the people and happenings of Dry Creek Ranch, Eagle, and the greater Boise area. This is another round of the West Ada School District Board of Trustee candidate interviews. One thing to remember, nobody knew what questions I was going to ask. I absolutely did not post any of these videos until the last interview was done, so nobody knew what was actually going to be said in the interviews. And if you could, real fast, please do consider just hitting subscribe and like if you're on YouTube, or just subscribing if you're on Apple Podcasts. I greatly appreciate the support. The more subscribers we get, the better guests we can get on, and the more informed the community can be. And a quick thank you to our sponsor, 208 Land Company. They are doing an incredible amount of work in Dry Creek Ranch and other areas. People that I've spoken with are exceptionally happy with them, primarily because they show up and they get the job done without question. They're very reliable, and again, everybody that I've spoken with has been very happy. So give them a shot, 208 Land Company, for all your landscaping needs. My guest today is the current trustee in Zone 5. She's been on the board for several years. She has really good insight about the progress that West Ada has made and the things that they have accomplished together in the time she's been here. She's very optimistic about the district and had great things to say to back that up. But I'll let you hear from her. Without further ado, the woman, the myth, the legend, Rene Ozuna. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you.
Good. You have your coffee. We're here. It's Tuesday morning. I was editing through these episodes last night and this morning, and they're awesome. You're the seventh candidate I've interviewed. I'm speaking with Tom right after you. I'm very encouraged. I think there are really good people that are really trying to help with schools. Where do you see your piece with this? Like, why are you running? What do you think needs to be done? What do you think you have done that's worthy of note? Let's just tell me.
Awesome. Well, thanks. First, thanks for pulling us all together, because I think it's really great to get information about the candidates out there. And there's not a good way, or I haven't seen a good way that happens. So I appreciate you pulling this all together for us. You know, for me, I served on a school boundary committee, and that's how I really got involved in looking at how policy impacts situations for families and community, and the importance of good policy and shaping some of that. So I got involved in the school boundary committee. Things were kind of turbulent at the district at the time, and some things were going on in the school board, and I thought, I'm going to go to a school board meeting and kind of see what this is all about. So I started to go. I had a girlfriend. We'd go and grab a coffee and go to school board meetings and watch and learn and listen. And there was a recall going on at the time in my area, and that gentleman resigned. So I applied for his open seat, was appointed to the school board, finished his term for 3 years, and then I ran unopposed for 4 after that. So why am I here? I have learned so much. I'm an advocate for kids. I don't have an ulterior motive. Really, I just want to support our staff. I want to support good education. I think that that's really important. Good schools help build good communities. I'm a big believer in that. I think all of our kids deserve good things, and things look different throughout our community a little bit. But, you know, I think that from an education standpoint, we should offer similar things throughout all of our public schools. So that's why I'm here. That's why I'm staying around. Hopefully I'm going to continue for another 4 years.
I appreciate that. So 7 years on the school board. Here's an unfair question, and it's unfair because it's unique to you out of the people in your zone, Zone 5, right? You have had 7 years, right? So when people are talking about you and the time you've been on the board and why they should reelect you, what would you want them to think about with the 7 years you've had? Like, what has happened over those 7 years?
Gosh, I think, you know, we're education.
Could you pull this just a little bit closer, actually?
Yeah.
Perfect.
We're education first. And I think over 7 years, you can look at what our test scores look like. You can look at the great things that are happening in the classroom and with the quality of education. Our teachers work really hard, and our administrators work really hard to support what's happening there. You know, we're constantly doing things to improve the instruction in the classroom. And for me, I want to continue on that, like continue building on what we already have. We're a growing district that pros and cons with that. You know, in what that means for us, but it means we do have some new schools and some new things, and super exciting and a great place to be. And I want to support the great things continuing.
Okay. The growth is a real hot topic. Okay. And I actually found out halfway through these interviews that it's far more complex than what I thought. So first off, tell me what you think about the growth, how West Ada can kind of address it, and what they are doing and what they plan to do. Obviously we'll get to the levy eventually, but talk to me about growth and where you think help is needed the most and what West Ada is doing to address it.
When I first started on the board, we didn't have a good way of looking at even where the growth was coming from. I mean, you could kind of in general what areas are growing, but we really fine-tuned working with the city, what kind of plats are approved, how many kids we expect, how many kids each neighborhood turns out, depending on what kind of a neighborhood it is. So that's allowed us to plan forward on where we need to put our new schools, how soon we expect for those locations to build out. That's a huge part of it, right? Being able to be proactive in handling the growth. I think that there's more we could do there if the funding was different. One of the things with West Ada in our past, we typically have only been able to get a bond approved once the growth is already so severe that there's no space left in the school. We have kids in the gym for classrooms and parking lots that don't fit the cars and just severe issues. This plant facility levy that we tried to run was going to give us an opportunity to be ahead of the growth and be ready for, we could open a school before it's at capacity at opening, that kind of a thing. We were going to be able to be ahead of that.
Now, the plant facilities levy wasn't just to build new schools. There was a certain amount of money allotted to that, but a lot of it was also things like maintenance, playgrounds,
for sure, and aging
servicing
schools. We have a couple schools that need major remodels.
Right. So it's servicing existing facilities. It wasn't, people talk about the levy. It's like, well, if we had the levy, we could have addressed more growth, but it's like, okay, but a lot of that also is, paint jobs and roofs and
parking lots and ADA compliant playgrounds. And
Right. Okay. So getting ahead of it and planning appropriately, look, which classes are the biggest, where are those classes happening? Is it a high school? Is it an elementary school? What area, right? And then working with the appropriate people makes sense. Here's something that I found out, again, halfway through doing the school board interviews. The biggest population West Ada has ever had was actually 2019. Then obviously you have some drop from COVID. You come back in 22 and 23, and it's actually lower both years. So 22 was higher than 23. So we're actually shrinking, not by a ton, right? We're talking 500 students or 1,000 students or something. But West Ada was experiencing a really significant growth through the teens. But then once we hit 2020, it's kind of stopped and is dropping. And Boise School District is actually experiencing a much more severe drop than West Ada. But what do you think about the drop playing into, how we have to manage growth? Because the greatest, and I pulled this data to be really clear on this, the highest population classes right now are, I thought they were originally junior and seniors, but now I found out they're sophomore and juniors. So when the sophomore and junior class graduate in 2 or 3 years, those people will be gone, right? And the classes that are coming up, the freshman, 8th, 7th, 6th grade, those are not as large of classes. Do you anticipate that the district will continue to drop in population, or do you think that that you see fluctuations regularly, or how does that affect the growth equation?
I'm not sure, because you're right. We were adding about almost 1,000 kids a year for a while. And when COVID hit, there was a big movement toward homeschool. There's a large group of homeschool kids and more charter schools and other things that have.
This podcast is brought to you by mtustudios.com. If you are looking to start a podcast or make content for any level of your business, MTU Studios can help. Just reach out to us today and we can start shooting tomorrow. Or private schools. Private schools pop up all the time.
Yeah, exactly. So all of that has impacted what our numbers look like. The challenge is in some of the major growth areas like Star, our schools over there are not big enough to support the growth that's happening in that area. Even though we're losing numbers throughout the district, we still have severe growth in certain pockets.
Oh, that makes perfect
sense.
So
when you look at it by school, you'll see some differences. And even throughout our history, we do have, neighborhoods age out, right? They start new, they have lots of kids, the kids leave, it's a little bit of an older population. We see this kind of on the east side of our district.
Gotcha. So even though, and we're not talking about a gigantic drop in numbers. So even though we have decreased slightly, bottom line is we're growing in some areas and we might be shrinking in other areas. Yeah. It's not even all across the school district. So there are areas that are very impacted and potentially being underserved from an education standpoint. And then there are areas that are a little bit lighter that might be going through what you're talking about, transformation and maturation with families and dynamics.
And then when you look at kind of the overall area, you have to decide, okay, so this school is decreasing while these ones are increasing. Do you shift the attendance areas? And that's part of, what you look at if you don't have new schools. And even if you do have new schools, you still are looking at how you would kind of adjust your population. But attendance area changes are really tough on kids and families.
Yeah, especially if you've been coming up. I mean, if you snag somebody in pre-K or K, then, fine, they don't know any different. But if you snag somebody in like middle school and you make them go to a completely different area, that's obviously a really impactful thing.
It's really hard. So if you are opening a new school and the attendance areas are changing anyway, because they have to when you open a new school, that's a good time to look at it. When you're making a change to handle just the growth without the additional school, it's tough.
The growth and the concern with growth and managing and making sure that we keep a high quality of education that West Ada provides. And it does provide a very good education. In Idaho, it's number one. It's the best school district, isn't it? Or it's like it's top somewhere. I can't remember the exact number.
The ISAT data just came out, and West Ada is number one for ELA and math among the largest school districts in the state of Idaho. And I think we had 16 schools on the top 10 lists listed at one or more times. Individual schools. So
for different top 10 lists.
Yeah.
I was going to say 16 schools on the top 10 list
Sorry.
is a little odd.
Different top 10 lists.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, so again, tremendous education, right? And especially for such a large school district. Yeah. So the growth and concern that we drop in that education really led to the big levy ask, right? The $500 million over 10 years. Talk to me about this. What did you think about the levy? Why do you think it didn't pass? And how do you think that's going to impact the school district?
One of the things that I have heard over time is, why aren't we ahead of the growth? I loved the 10-year idea because it gave us a plan and an ability to levy money if we needed it. We didn't even have to levy it if we didn't need the funds. But it gave us the ability to levy dollars as we needed them to handle the growth. Ahead of the growth like we've been asked for. But I do think 10 years and the dollar amount was hard for people to grasp. The board could change. The superintendent could change. All of those things. At the same time that we were running this, the state was talking about providing some dollars to schools to pay off old debt. There were dollars going into the schools to increase teacher salaries. There's all this talk at the state at the same time. So I think all of that together made the message really complicated. And it's the first time we've ever tried a 10-year plan. It was a plant facilities levy as opposed to a bond. So that's different. We were going to save a lot of interest, but it's also a 10-year versus a 30, which makes the levy a little bit higher, the levy rate a little bit higher. I think it was complicated.
Now, some people have said that there was an inappropriate designation as a plant facility levy. Under the plant facility levy, all of the dollars were going to be going to literally maintaining, upgrading, and building new facilities, right? This was not going to teacher retirement or an underfunded teacher pension.
Yep.
This was not going to salaries. It was literally going directly to repairing, maintaining, and building new facilities. Correct?
That's accurate. Yep.
Okay.
Only facilities. It's the only thing that money could have been used for. Facilities, playgrounds, parking lots, all of that's included, but cannot be spent in general fund.
Because I think a lot of I'll talk about myself. Moving from Northern California, we were always being asked to fund new things, and it was like you'd get exhaustion, right? Like you do a fun run, and then it was can you help with the ed fund? They'd just come out and say, can you write us a $600 check? If everybody writes a $600 check, then the education fund, which adds books and times in libraries, that gets fully funded. So my wife and I diligently write a $600 check, and literally 2 weeks later, they were hitting us up for something else. And this is just at the local school level. And then they were letting organizations into the school to get our kids pumped up about, this fundraiser. I'm like, who are these people you're letting in to talk to my kindergartner? My kindergartner's coming home and he's like all worked up about us logging on and donating. I was like, what is happening? So I got really burnt out. And especially because it was not a facilities levy. It wasn't a facilities specific thing. It was, we're going to increase hours for librarians. Yeah, some of it is we might get new materials, but a large portion of it was getting burnt on teacher salaries. Yeah. And in fact, in 2020, there was a big strike in the San Ramon Valley Unified School District. And it eventually came out that what had happened, nobody really knew. And I flushed this out actually on my podcast down there, that the teachers union and the district were going to bat because the teachers union found out that the district was saving every single year $1 million for refreshing books. Because they're like, look, when you buy a set of books that's going to last 5 to 10 years, you don't save up the money in the year that you need the books because it's too much money. Yeah. You need to save up $5 or $6 million to do this. It's called refresh. So that the union found out that the district was hoarding and like stashing away this money. And they're like, the district is not a bank. That money needs to be distributed in atypical salary raises for this particular year. And they're like, oh my God, right? And when people found that out, they were furious. So that's not the situation here. The money was going to actual facilities.
The money was going to actual facilities.
Gotcha.
Yes.
For the people that are concerned about ever increasing tax bills based on education, what would you, especially for people that don't have children in the district, how do you explain that to them?
I think one thing that we need to recognize is that the state has a responsibility to fund education, but in the state of Idaho, there is no way to fund school facilities except for bonds and levies. That's the only avenue we have for facilities. So that means that to handle the growth, we have to bond or levy to be able to open a new school. There's no other mechanism for us. And maintaining schools, we have our general fund, but there's not enough there to pay our teachers, good salaries and our staff and run the operations and take care of all the maintenance needs that we have. So hence the plant facility levy that we've had for years.
Right. And to be clear, the teachers in West Ada are not getting rich. Right, and I remember in it's like 2008, 2009, especially when the economy was struggling, news organizations started not coining it, but popularizing the fat cat teacher concept, where it's like they're out of school by 3, they're at the mall by 3:30, they have all summer off, like they're making all this money. Here, and again, perhaps some school districts are. That's fine. It's none of my affair. But West Ada has one of the lowest per student budgets out of anywhere in the nation. Am I correct on that?
You are correct. And West Ada teachers did get an increase this year. I think it was about $4,700 per teacher, thanks to the state, and well-deserved. But I still don't think it puts them where it should be. And that's, when you talk about funding, the supplemental levy is out there, right? And supplemental levy does help us with our general fund. But that's part of it. I think our community understands that our teachers aren't paid where they need to be. We don't have additional money for books. We don't have the money to run our operations. And I do think that that's why over all of these years, we've had support on that supplemental levy piece.
Gotcha. There's one thing you said that I really do want to point out is the difficulty of teachers living where they teach. It was something that was really acute in California. Like you had teachers that just there's no way. And, there are issues with that come from that, where people are serving a community that they can't afford to live in. And I don't think that it's necessary. Like I don't think the viewpoint that they're entitled to live where they work is an accurate one. There are plenty of people that commute for all kinds of jobs. But I also value education very much. So when you say, hey, look, maybe they're not getting paid what they should, it's like, well, it'd be certainly a big stretch for a teacher to live in Eagle, for instance, if they're teaching at, Eagle Middle School without some kind of spousal, income or something of that nature. So I think that's a difficult one, but
one of the things that's difficult in our area is that our cost of living used to be different than it is today. And so you could live on a teacher's salary, right? Or 2 teachers in a household and be comfortable. And as the market's changed and our area has grown, that looks a little bit different, and it's harder. There are higher paying jobs to support our higher cost of living in this area now. And especially for the paras and the other staff.
Sure.
So,
now, again, I'm sorry, what were you saying?
No, you're good.
And again, I am sympathetic to people that are like, look, I either homeschool my kids or they go to private school, or, I don't have children anymore in the school district or something. I think those people have a good point with saying, hey, I don't want my tax bill to continue increasing. Is there something specific that you would convey to them to emphasize there's still value here for you in supplying the schools with the required funds?
Yeah, I'll just say, again, I believe very strongly that strong schools are strong communities, and we need to be producing highly educated kids to come out to be contributing members of our community. In West Ada specifically, because of the way that we've managed our debt, we just approved in September, our levy rate's going down to $60 per 100,000. So for a $500,000 house, that's $300 is your tax bill for West Ada for this upcoming year. It's a great quality of education for that price. Yeah, I don't know that you'd touch that anywhere throughout the nation.
No, I think you'd probably be hard pressed, especially considering nationally how West Ada ranks and the successes. With regard to the levy, there were some people that were saying that the communication. In fact, I think Representative Benetti, Trustee Benetti, said that he felt that the conveying the information and what was going on in the levy. I think a lot of people saw the price tag and they saw the time duration. They got really turned off by it. And conveying what's going on, really pinpointing where the dollars are going, what's required, what's needed, all those things. Do you think essentially offering some form of like audit or like forensic analysis of the levy that people could see and assess for themselves would have helped? And do you think like an audit in general of West Ada on like an annual basis would be a good idea?
I think audits are really important, and school districts are required to go through an audit. So we go through an audit process every year. The audit is out there. It's public. In fact,
wait. There's a public audit that people can view right now from last year, the year prior,
yes, there is.
Where would somebody get the audit?
I believe that it is posted on our website. I believe it's certainly posted with the board documents if it's not direct on the website, because the board approves, we talk about the audit in a couple different meetings and then we have to approve and accept the audit. So that is all out there. We have many years in a row received an award because of the great team that we have in our financial area of the district. I should know what this award is called, but it's related to the audit. Yeah. Ooh, Jonathan, save me on this one. But very fiscally responsible in how they manage their money, and that information is out there.
Is this an independent audit? Like, do they bring in some outside?
Yes, they do. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And it's a requirement. I believe all school districts in Idaho go through it.
I did not know that. Miguel actually in the interview said, I think we need to have an audit. And I was like, yeah, that sounds common sense. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know that it already exists. So check that one off, Miguel.
Check that one off there. Go get your materials, or I'd be happy to provide them to him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or anybody that wants to look at those, because, it is important. It's tax dollars. We need to spend them wisely.
Okay, so that's great. Now, with regard to the levy, again, just that last point, do you think that communication for future asks right? And let's make the gross assumption that you're not going to, or the school board, whether you're on it or not, will likely not attempt to do a $500 million 10-year plants and facilities levy in the near future. But for the ask moving forward, do you think it would be better or more effective to help the taxpayers know really precisely where all of those dollars are going for that you're asking, instead of like 15 millions for playground and, whatnot?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. And, if you added up all of those numbers, you would find that they don't add up to 500 million. So there was an additional pool of money that was there to handle future growth that we don't know yet, right? Because one of the things that the district really tried hard to do was to say, we're not going to come back to you in 10 years. Like, this is our commitment to you, which superintendent could change, the board could change. So, I suppose somebody could, but that was their intention, was to not come back. So to have a buffer for, hey, we have more growth than we expected, but we have this money for additional school. With the plant facility levy, if you don't need it, then you don't levy it. We have times in the past where we haven't levied the emergency levy when we've been able to do that because we didn't need to. We're not, the current board, the current administration, they're not going to levy dollars that are not necessary. But hard for people to know and understand that too.
Right.
So yeah.
And also hard to predict what's going to happen in the future, right? There's the whole concept that you're preparing students for jobs that don't exist yet and you don't know what they are.
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of like, look, we're doing our best.
Right.
Who knows what the sixth grader will be going into when they either graduate from high school or graduate from college. I mean, it's wild. You don't, you have no idea.
Yeah. So you asked, could we do a better job at outlining exactly where the dollars are going and sharing that information differently? Yes. I mean, clearly we needed to do a better job at that. Clearly we needed to communicate differently, better. We needed to get more input. Do you want to see a 10-year? Do you want to see a 5-year? Is it important to the community for us to plan for growth? Would they rather have us do it in bits and pieces? Those are all things that we're going to have to uncover and work with the community so that we can decide what we do next.
Right. Makes sense. Now, growth, right? And planning for the future. Let's talk about the seniors, the juniors, the sophomores, the people that are really at the tail end of their education in West Ada. You have in this area, which I have admired since the second I found out about it, this real commitment to educating, not just, hey, you have to learn trigonometry or, whatever, but like education appears to mean something different in this area, which I couldn't be happier about, which is, hey, let's actually help people leave and be contributing, thriving members of society, not just, one way going to college, because I don't believe everybody should go to college. I just flat out don't think that the value there is there for everyone.
Right.
And again, education is not bad, but the return that you're going to get for some people in certain universities with certain degrees, with certain propensities and character traits, it's just not there. Right. And I think a lot of people get sucked into the idea that it's like, well, I got to go $100,000 or $200,000 in debt for this degree that I don't really care about and doesn't really mean anything. Yeah. I'm sorry, yeah?
You also don't want to take Johnny at 3rd grade and say, you're on the career path and you're on the college path. Mm-hmm. So at West Ada, it's our vision to have all students be career and college ready. You choose what path you want to go, and we're going to put the opportunities out there for you to decide and be able to go on.
So this is my question. You're hitting it. Are we doing enough for the students that want to go to college and want to be competitive in the application process? And are we doing enough for the students that aren't going the college route and want to come out at 18 being educated and prepared to take on the world?
I think we're doing a really good job, and I think we could continue to do much better.
Let's talk about college first then.
Yeah.
We're doing a really good job.
We're doing
Talk
a good
to
job.
me about what we're doing to help the students be competitive.
Our not career counselors, but our college counselors, right, in our schools, the counselors that are working with the kids on kind of making sure that they're meeting all their graduation requirements, what classes are you taking, what comes next, that needs to go another step. Where do you want to go to college? What are you looking for, and what kind of classes do you need to take in order to set you up to be have the possibility of getting accepted into those schools. I think that continuing to expand on that, there would be a lot of benefit in that. I mean, they're really helpful now, but there's not enough of them for the real detail that they need for all of those kids. So that's an area I'd like to see us do better with our kids on.
Do you think there are enough class options?
I do believe that West Ada has enough class options if students are willing to travel to other schools. So if you want to take an AP something, right, you might have to travel from Centennial to Rocky to get that class. And those options are available for our students to travel for that. Oh. But we don't offer all classes at all buildings. So,
okay.
So yes, throughout our area, but not in individual schools.
So perhaps an area to improve. But there's also the problem with, if you only have 5 kids at a specific high school that want, say, AP Calc or Calc BC or, AP biology, you can't have so there's a certain degree of inefficiency and just prohibitive population numbers that have the desired class. Okay. And I'm sorry.
Exactly. And especially as you get into those upper classes like that, right? Because the numbers do decrease and how many students are looking and taking those.
Right. And I'm sorry, I interrupted. You were saying SAT and ACT?
Oh, I think that's another opportunity where we can provide additional support and training for our kids and preparing to, be successful when they are taking those tests.
Do you guys do any, curriculum or outside stuff at this point, offering like boot camps or anything?
They do at the high schools, yeah.
They do
they give them a lot of support there.
Great. Talk to me about the kids that aren't going to college now, the kids that need to be functional, thriving with some manner of skill set when they graduate.
So we're really fortunate that we have great CTE programs, career and technical education, programs, and many of them and in different locations throughout our district. So they're great. We have computer sciences, we have automotive, there's welding, there's veterinary science, we have construction trade, culinary arts. We have all of these wonderful programs where kids can come out and actually have a certification when they graduate and go directly into the workforce. We also have great community partners to help us with these programs. We couldn't do it without our community partners. With CTE, the need there is greater than the number of spaces we have available. So it's an area where we really want to grow so that we can put more kids into those programs. Similar to some of the AP classes, our students have to be willing to travel to different locations to take those.
Gotcha. Sticking with the high schoolers.
Yeah.
I'm actually very fortunate to be meeting with Officer Gomez tomorrow.
Great.
And talking to him about the risks that parents are encountering and students are encountering, really on all levels. But you primarily deal with cyber risk and issues with the youngers because they can't, like if you're in 3rd grade, nobody really has access to your 3rd grader. They're not getting access to drugs and alcohol and that, so you got to worry about them playing roadblocks or something. Yeah. But for high schoolers, they're moving and they have interactions with a much broader spectrum of the population. The risks and, frankly, consequences to their actions are far greater. Do you think we're doing enough to help educate the students and parents, the families in general of West Ada, the risk of drugs, the risk of a lot of those types of things? Do you think we're doing enough to keep the population safe and try to educate them about the risks?
No, I don't. I think that the risks, the drugs in our area, how that impacts our students, continues to grow. So I think that any money and resources we put in there are well spent. Officer Gomez, I follow him too. I learn something from him all the time, everything that I read. So I'm so thankful for what he does to raise awareness and raise parent awareness for things that they may not know. But I learned that information from Officer Gomez. I don't get that information from the school. So I think that we could do a better job with that.
that's a really good point.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good point that it's, hey, you know, we should be perhaps be the hub for this information for our population. And not to say that Officer Gomez doesn't have a wonderful place continuing as a wonderful partner, but you know, why isn't the district coming out and providing this information, you know, instead of hosting someone else?
Right. And then should that be our role? I don't know that, you know, there should be additional conversations around that, but certainly more information there's better. Information about, Officer Gomez shares a lot of information about social media and what kind of things to look for and how kids use that technology and just where the risks are. So all of that is great information from our parents, whether it comes from him, comes directly from the schools, comes from, you know, other avenues, but it's good to get it out there.
So what you just said, is that the role of the school, right? So a lot has been made about the roles of public schools throughout the nation in the last several years. Because some people really have stretched, in my mind, they've stretched the interpretation of education and having a safe space, excuse me. Mm-hmm. Actually, I feel really bad because Susie, when she came in, she was like, well, I think people need to have a safe environment for learning. And I was like, what do you mean by safe?
Right.
Safe from who? Right? Because there's so many people. I mean, you see the episodes down in, you know, like Chino Hills and other areas in the country where some elected education people are making the argument that the district needs to keep children safe from, you know, potential downfall at home because of, you know, gender identity and things of that. Yeah. It's wild. And you're like, wait, okay, if you know of a risk, call CPS, right? Like, but don't talk to me about some hypothetical risk and how you have to hide information about my kid. Yeah. I'm kind of giving up my position here, obviously, but in your role, or excuse me, in your mind, what is the role of the school? Like, how do you flush that out? Because let me just tell you one quick thing. I had a big criticism of some of the sex ed curriculum in California in the public schools when my kids were starting to go through it. And my sister, who was a teacher for a brief period of time in LA Unified, said, all right, look, understandable, no problem. And not saying send your kids, but there is a degree of helping identify students that may be getting abused that didn't know it, right? So as you go through, you know, the sex ed curriculum and stuff, they're trying to, part of it is trying to identify, it's like, well, this kid doesn't know it's bad if like the uncle touches him or her or something like that. And I was like, all right. So there is a degree of trying to identify and bring light to people that are in bad situations, but that's in my mind totally different. Yeah. What do you think? Like, what's the school's role here as far as, you know, gender identity, as far as information with parents? Do you think that the parents should always be informed immediately, or do you think there's ever a case where there's some degree of privacy for the student's behalf? What do you think?
You know, I think that the school's role is education first. But along with that, the students need to be in a good environment to be ready to learn. So talking about things like, let's talk about nutrition. You know, we want to be able to feed our kids so that they're well fed, they're able to, I think that helps them to learn. I believe in neutral classrooms. I think that puts them in a better environment for learning. What's a neutral classroom? A neutral classroom. So not bringing politics into the classroom. Better environment for learning. Gender identity. Parents do have rights to that information. And so, you know, I think right now that information is shared with parents as students come to teachers or individuals to talk about that. I mean, it's, you know, and it's state law also, it helps define that and puts those parameters in place for teachers. Did I answer your question there?
You did. Yeah. That's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Parents do have rights and have access to information. And I think that, you know, we work better for our kids when we work together.
Here's a question for you. Do you think that books represent free speech? And let me be really specific here. And I know this one's kind of out there, but there's an argument that people try to make that every manner of book should be supplied to public schools and kept in public schools because in the absence of that policy, you're actually infringing on freedom of speech.
Our public schools serve our children. I believe that in our libraries, our public school libraries, we should have age-appropriate material. So, we have a book review process. If a book is challenged, we look at those. Is it appropriate for like the high school level, for example? If it is, the book stays in. If it's not, the book comes out. Through our book review process, we've had books that have gone on both sides of that. So again, this is public school libraries for our children. They need to be age appropriate.
God bless it. Thank God.
Yeah.
I've actually been, again, this is a question that comes up,
Yeah.
and my classic example is like, look, would you show a 12-year-old Arnold Schwarzenegger's Total Recall? Like, no, that's an R-rated movie for obvious reasons.
Yes.
Not saying that like adults can't see it, but if the 12-year-old walked up to a public movie theater, I mean, not public,
Right.
but like you walk up to a movie theater, we have age-restricted media. They're like, look, you're 12, you're not going in to see Arnie blowing people up and
Exactly.
nudity and, Quaid start the reactor kind of thing. Like, you
I
just
don't want to
wouldn't do
sound
it.
like a book banner, but there are books that are not appropriate even at the high school level, and they shouldn't be there. They belong in the public library, not in the school library.
Define a book banner. I'm so curious about this term, especially when it comes to public school libraries. What is a book banner? Because people throw this around.
They do throw it around, and to me that means that somebody's throwing you a list of books, these are inappropriate, and you're pulling them off the shelves.
Inappropriate for what and what shelves?
Inappropriate for the students at the school. So they're pulling them off. Some of them might be inappropriate and should come off the shelves. Like I said, West Ada had a couple that we were asked to look at that were inappropriate, and we pulled them off the shelves. What I think is really important in the process, though, is you don't get a list of books from somebody that says these are inappropriate, pull them down. You get a list that says these are inappropriate, and then you put them through your book review process and really evaluate whether it's appropriate to stay in or come off.
Now,
that's the difference to me.
I appreciate that. I think my criticism of the book banning label is, one, fine. Anybody who doesn't want the history of Penthouse in an elementary school library then falls under the category of a book banner. That's it. You're like, hey, you're not going to have this book in the elementary public school. And they would be right to yank it.
They would be right.
But they conflate the idea of a book banner with like, you're burning books. You're not allowed to purchase them. Parents can't get them for their students. Perhaps a public library that in my mind should still have some manner of propriety and restrict. Like, you're not going to have history of Penthouse in a public library. That's probably, or like pornography,
right?
Or like
right.
Just like not even a
a
historical analysis, but like just straight up porn. You're not going to have that there. And there are obviously really, really specific gray areas, like 50 Shades of Grey, right? Like, how does that fall? But again, that's an adult style book, not appropriate in like an elementary school. Right. So
wouldn't it be great if we had a rating system for books that we could use?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. We have Common Sense Media, right? And Common Sense Media actually has gone through a degree of capture itself because I rally against, or I did in California. I don't really have the need here as much, which is wonderful because I don't enjoy doing it, but rallied against really inappropriate books that were being assigned or table book assignment. Are you familiar with this? Where okay, so one way to get around, say I have a really, really, really inappropriate book. Okay. One way for me to get around that literally has like graphic depictions of pornography in it, but it's, artist rendering. So it's not an actual person. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I have this book.
Yeah.
And I kind of want you to read it as like my student because I'm a crazy English teacher.
Okay.
I know I can't directly assign you this cray-cray book. What I do is I bring you into the library and say, all right, look, on this table, there are 4 books. Your assignment is to check out one of them and read it. Okay, now you start thumbing through these books. You're like, oh my God, I'm not going to pick any of these books. You can't assign me this book. You're like, no. I'm not assigning you any book. I'm saying you have to check out a book and you get to select from the table which book you want. So it's a way of skirting the impropriety of some books and the fact that any common sense person selecting an individual book would say, well, you can't assign this. I'm like, oh, I didn't assign it.
Yeah.
So there are ways that people get around it. And I think Common Sense Media originally attempted to help people and school districts figure out as kind of its own rating system. Like, hey, the school district is too cowardly to have its own review system, so they just default to Common Sense Media. But Common Sense Media has things that are just bonkers. Any cursory analysis of some of these books is just, it's out there. And again, I studied rhetoric in college. I love books, right? And then I really appreciate the value of being able to see both sides of arguments, to understand nuances, all this stuff. But there's obviously some degree of common sense that has to be applied. And the fact that West Ada actually takes that on, it's like, hey, we stand by a book review system, and parents can come and object. You can have your case heard. We'll go through many iterations of many levels of analysis and review, and then go from there. Yeah, and at West Ada, a parent or a community member can bring forward, I'm concerned about this book. A community member, not even a parent. Not even a parent. Taxpayer dollars, right? So you don't even have to be a parent. So anybody can bring forward a request to review a book. And we'll go through that process. But in addition, West Ada is taking, hey, here's some books in general that people have concerns about. Let's proactively start going through these and identifying which ones are appropriate for libraries and which ones aren't. So they're doing that as well. Because we don't want books in our libraries that are inappropriate for students. Right. Right. Common sense, right? Man, it hurts. Like, it hurts my head. It's like, how are you I don't understand at times. Okay. You have been, again, engaged deeply with the school district at the board level for 7 years. What are things you're worried about? Because you are privy to things that the average person, even those running against you, just don't know. What are things that concern you, and what are things that you're really happy about that are like successes that you feel of the school district? I am, outside of growth and how we handle school funding, I am most worried about teacher hiring and retention. And this is a nationwide problem, right? It's not unique to West Ada, but that is a challenge, getting good people into our classrooms, and not even just the teachers, but the staff members that we need to support all of our kids. So that's a challenge, and one that we're continuing to work on to make West Ada the place where these people want to be and stay, and have others come. Second part of your question? Let me follow up on this first. Yeah, and the second part is what are good things that are happening. But let's talk about teacher retention a little bit. There are some people that scream for the mountaintops, like double teacher salary. And to be quite frank, for a period of my life as an educator, because I very much loved teaching, but realized, I could never be a public school teacher. My argument was always, look, if you had paid teachers twice as much, Matt would have applied to be a public school teacher. Do you think that's a fair argument, that the problem with retention is just pay? No, I don't think so. I think for the most part, teachers don't do this job for pay, right? They really want to give back to kids, are passionate about education. Some of them like the flexibility of the schedule and how it matches the schedule for their own children. And there's lots of other reasons that teachers enter into that profession. And it's not the pay. It's not the pay, but it's getting harder to be a teacher in the classroom. What does that mean? It's getting harder. What does that mean? Like in a practical sense, like why is it harder? If you're teaching math, you're teaching math. I think our teachers don't feel the same appreciation from the community and the parents as they used to. COVID was really tough on our teachers. I think that teachers took the brunt of the parent frustration, and that was hard. Our kids have different challenges than they've had in the past. Technology and how that's used or not used in the classroom brings a variety of issues. Changes at the district level, right? Changes in curriculum. There's constant change with our teachers now, and I just think it's tough. They spend a lot of extra hours on the job. They spend a lot of their personal dollars for the job, and it's tough. And I think that that's going to be a challenge we need to continue to just be honest about and work on. I've heard people say that before, and other people just blow it off. It's like, I'm sorry, I'll just pay you to just do this job. And like, how about I don't show up on Teacher Appreciation Day and, grovel and just say how amazing you are. But one very close analogy that I think a lot of people are experiencing across the nation is underappreciation for first responders, right? Like I know at least 4 or 5 Oakland, ex-Oakland police officers who've moved up to this area alone that were like, it was atrocious. You have this public sentiment that the police are out to get everyone. They're defunding the police. They're putting them at greater risk. And all for what? So people can just tell you you're a terrible person for trying to police. Right. I feel like people understand that. You know, people fly the blue American flag up here all the time because they're like, look, this is really, really important to appreciate law enforcement. I don't think they recognize that same thing for teachers.
I don't think so either. You know, we had a, you're absolutely right. I don't think that we show the appreciation that we need to for our teachers. I do think that during COVID, that kind of highlighted the importance of our teachers in the classroom and the face-to-face interaction and the role that teachers played in our kids' lives and in the education. And where that became very divisive and hard on teachers, I think it also brought awareness and some support. But we have a long way to go in that space. In my opinion, we have a long way to go to really making our teachers feel valued.
Yeah. I will tell you, teaching over Zoom was absolutely atrocious. It was the most painful thing I ever done. I actually, I was doing entrance essay seminars. Amazingly, Mari, the gal running in Mari Gates, was at Stanford in some capacity. Back in like 2008, 2009, she actually read one of my students' entrance essays. We put it together because the student back in the day was like, oh yeah, I worked with this guy, Matt Todd, on this entrance essay. And she was like, do you remember this essay? It was really unique. And I was like, yeah I remember that kid.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But I was doing an entrance essay seminar, the last one online. I was like, I'll never do this again because you have to push students a lot, especially if you're doing education correctly, right? Everybody understands pushing people in athletics. If you have a soccer coach or a basketball coach screaming at somebody to do something again, fine, not screaming, but yelling and emphasizing and holding a standard, people get that. If you're in a math class and there's somebody yelling at a student to try it again, to believe that they can get it, to stop making mistakes, people freak out, right? Now, I'm not saying I yelled at everyone. I did yell at some. But the point is, I was talking to this one gal about an entrance essay. She wanted to study political science, I believe. And I was saying how unique the United States political system is. And we got on something about presidents. I was like, yeah, well, England can have a general election at any point. And the mom in the background, this is over Zoom, the daughter is literally looking at the screen and then looks up and then looks back down and was like, what just happened? She says, oh, my mom just says you're wrong. I'm like, no, I'm not. She's like, oh, my mom says you're absolutely wrong. And this isn't there are 20 people on the Zoom. So I literally stop the class and look up parliamentary rules. And it's 2/3 of, I think if 2/3 of parliament elect to have a general election, then it's literally, they can call an election. And it happens 6 weeks from then. So they can have it. It's not like a 4-year term that's guaranteed. They can actually make a call. I was right. That lady was wrong. But the point is, parents engaging, even in a small level, when you're trying to connect and get students in line, it was such a terrible thing. And again, I was not a public school teacher. Right. I was an SAT and college prep person for almost 20 years. It was the roughest time of my entire career. I was like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah. Let's be glad that we're all past that.
Yeah, thank God. Speaking of past that, or maybe not, I really dislike talking about COVID because I think it's just beating a dead horse, but there are some places in the country that have started reinstating mask mandates and whatnot. One of my dear friends, the reason I live up here now is because my dear friend moved up here in 2020 because his kids were suffering so much in the California school district on remote class. And he was like, look, they had masks and then they didn't have masks and, whatever. Yeah. What do you feel about mask mandates within public school? Within this public school, not nationally, within West Ada.
Right. There would not be another mask mandate in place. I'm confident that I can say that in West Ada.
What do you mean there wouldn't be? Or you wouldn't stand for it? These are two different things.
I am one trustee, right? I am one trustee, but looking at West Ada, looking at our community, even where I stand myself, I don't think that there would ever be another mask mandate in West Ada.
So knowing what you know as of today, because the world obviously changes, you would never be in favor of another mask mandate.
Knowing what we know today.
knowing what we know today. Like if the actual plague came through, maybe. But
Well,
you'd have to have hard science
but
on
we're
the
talking
plague.
about COVID and what
Right.
we know today about COVID. No, there wouldn't be a mandate on our kids.
Gotcha. Here's a question. It seems that a growing number of students and families have elected to do either private school or homeschool. Why do you think that is? And do you think that there's a let's just start with that. Why do you think that is?
I think that there was a big movement during COVID for people to move into different forms of education for their kids for a variety of reasons. Maybe they needed more face-to-face time. Maybe they didn't want their kids in the schools because they were worried about COVID, right? Like we lost kids on both ends of the spectrum. And a lot of those kids haven't come back. Some of them have, but a lot have not. And some of them have had great success and have told their friends and have told others. And so that's changing what education looks like out there.
Do you think that those students are going to come back?
I think we are getting some back, but not all. And we're losing others to private schools, charter schools, homeschooling groups.
Gotcha.
It's not the traditional public school setting isn't the right setting for all kids. And so I do appreciate that there are options for people to find what best fits, different lifestyles. We have a virtual schoolhouse, and we had almost 300 kids graduate from virtual schoolhouse last year.
Wow.
It's a lot. Yeah.
What is a virtual schoolhouse?
It's completely online schooling for our high school kids. We had elementary as well, and they didn't have enough in elementary.
I'm sorry. I need to get a side table.
Sorry.
I realize. My apologies.
They didn't have enough in the elementary school to continue that. But for high school, you have a virtual option for education in West Ada.
Well, that would pretty much solve the concern about mask mandates.
There you go. Yes. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, first, thank you for coming in today. We've talked about a myriad of things. Is there anything that actually, I did ask you, what do you think the school district has done that you're happy about, that you're optimistic about? You were worried about teacher retention. But the second part is hit me with the positive.
Oh, yeah. Academically, we have just the most amazing things going on. Our numbers continue to go up. We were just first among all of the traditional large high schools in our ISAT, ELA, and math results, which is an incredible celebration for us. We've added academic coaches, like math coaches, for example, or ELA coaches that are going in and helping our teachers with better instruction and sharing information between schools on what's working and sharing that information to really put in best practices throughout and to continue to provide the best education that we can for our kids. That's what I'm most proud of.
That's really cool that you have best practices in communication between departments is obviously really, really important. But even between schools, right? Because you try to get the whole math department together at one particular school and try to flush out what's working best for those individual people, fine. But you have people actually going campus to campus saying, hey, look, they've started doing this over here and they're doing so. If you guys,
this is what the results look like. So we're going to take that information over to the school that's struggling a little bit in that area, and we're going to share that information.
Wow,
it's great.
That's great.
And then seeing the success. We have an administration that, as they implement new programs, they're constantly looking back at what were the results of what we do. Because then they can make decisions on, did we carry it forward? Did we get the results that we expected and we need to keep it? Or that didn't work like we thought, so we're going to drop that and try something different. It's that continuous cycle of just getting better because it's our students, right?
Man, that's common sense too. Yeah. It's just figuring it out and then tracking it and then making the shift. Yeah.
You don't put things in place and just think they're going to happen without validating that you got the results you expected.
Well, maybe you don't. That doesn't mean everybody
I'm very thankful that that's happening.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, Renee, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. This is so great.
What a conversation. Is there anything else that you would like to express that we haven't touched on that you really want people to take into consideration?
Related to the election, the one thing, I'm a parent and I'm a grandparent. I have kids and grandkids in this district. I would just ask for your voters, the people that are listening, do your research and please support people that support our public school and our students. Our future, our community, it depends on it.
I agree. I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you for what you're doing. Good luck with the campaign and the election. And again, thanks on behalf of West Ada for what you have done.
Thanks.
This podcast is brought to you by mtustudios.com. If you are looking to start a podcast or make content for any level of your business, MTU Studios can help. Just reach out to us today and we can start shooting tomorrow.